My story is about escaping during quarantine. Um, my my family and I decided that for my dad in his 81st birthday that we should take him to visit his twin brother. One of the things to know about he and his twin brothers that they both suffer from dementia, and so that brings up kind of all sorts of things trying to keep in contact during quarantine. Talking to them about COVID, they don't really remember that COVID exists. So, with them, with strangers, whatever, they'll try to shake hands. They'll, just have conversation, get in people's faces. And that's the challenge, and how do you tell someone with dementia that they can't do that because they can't remember, right, about the COVID. So, with my dad and his twin brother, he lives out in Rapid City, South Dakota, actually out in the Black Hills National Forest backyard. It's absolutely beautiful. Um, but during quarantine, we had managed to do a number of, Zooms, FaceTime talks. We did WhatsApp, all of those things to try to keep them connected with one another. But it was always, it wasn't the same as them being able to see each other. And because they're twins, there's such a unique bond between us that can't you can't replace that with anything. You can't replace any relationship with a twin and they're not their other twin. I don't even know. It's a strange thing. And people with twins or have family with twins, they get it. They see it regularly, right? So we decided that we would take this trip. And we're going to take my dad, leave my mom at home. And so it was my husband and I, my two children, and my dad. And it started out great. The day was beautiful. It was like 70 degrees, October, mid-October, and we started traveling. And we got to Sioux Falls, and we made our first stop. Our goal was to not like really stay anywhere longer than 15 minutes. Try to get in and out without having contact with people as much as we could. So we made it to Sioux Falls. We gassed up, used the restrooms, got food to go, and hit the road. And as we traveled, for those who are familiar with I-90, the terrain starts to change, and we always get really excited as we come towards the Missouri River right outside of Chamberlain, and it's our kind of a family favorite of watching the river all of a sudden appear as you're driving into the perspective. So, and it's like everything kind of changes for us. We're officially on vacation mode once we cross the river because it means that we're going to eventually be in mountain time and just things are, it's just completely different. The sky is bigger. It's beautiful. Once we did that, my dad started to realize like we were going someplace that he's familiar with. And he would ask occasionally where my mom is and things like that. But for the most part, he was totally relaxed and having a good trip. So as we continued to drive, it started to snow. And this is mid-October, so this is even unusual for Minnesotans to be getting snow so early. And so it was kind of cool to watch the snow come down. It wasn't bad and it wasn't accumulating on the ground, so it was easy to drive in. But it was just kind of cool to be driving out there and have the snow. It's not something we usually experience. We usually only go up to those in the summertime. So we continue to drive, and the snow progressively gets worse and worse. And so as we get to Murdo area and then even to Wall, it starts like kind of blowing and sleeting at us. Still not accumulating, but it's just heavy. But at the same time, my dad is starting to realize like we're going to be close to his twin. He knows enough with this dementia that he was close to his twin. So he became very concerned that we were not going to stop and see his twin. So he would ask questions about that and wanted to make sure we're like, of course we're going to stop and see your brother. We're going to stay with him. So, and he was excited. And it was always kind of in increments. So it's hard to describe what it's like, but he would ask about it, and then there, we'd have downtime when we didn't talk about it. Then he would come back kind of the same question, and we would repeat it again. So as we entered Rapid City, it was full-fledged snow. There was snow accumulated, and my dad was very excited at this point. He wanted to make sure that my uncle knew that we were coming and that we were calling. But the fun thing about that was my aunt did not want my uncle to know because she wanted it to be a surprise. And it wouldn't have mattered. Probably he wouldn't have retained it either, right? And so we drove up the hill to go see him. And I always remember we finally made it. They lived 10 miles outside of Rapid City. And we were all just in awe because the hills were so monochromatic. Just it's already the Black Hills, right, for a reason. And then you add the whiteness to it. And it was just, oh, I don't know. It was so relaxing. And I heard someone refer to snow as being cleansing, and that's kind of how it felt for us in some ways. It was just like we were getting to experience something magical, and it's because it was mid October, right? And so we go in the house, and my aunt and uncle are sitting on their chairs, and my dad is the black behind us. So it's me, and then my husband and my two kids, and then all of a sudden, well, my uncle reacts like, "Oh, what are you all doing here?" You know, and then he sees his brother, and he was like, "You brought this guy with you?" He was super excited, right? And so we all gave each other hugs, and we just were very just happy to be there. My aunt and uncle, because they lived 10 miles out of Rapid City, had been very isolated, and they were feeling the effects of COVID and loneliness, because they are, in their early 80s. And so just the lack of interaction, and they're two very social people. Like my aunt actively taught exercise classes at the senior center, and she stopped doing that. And my uncle golfed and um, uh, would volunteer time so he could golf with groups and things like that at the golf course. So they had to stop all of those things, and just really, it was draining on them. So by the time we showed up, they were ready for some changes and do something different. And so just the excitement of having us there just added to everything. And it was like seriously became what felt like a 3 day party, because everything went out the window as far as, like, my aunt likes to keep a very distinct like sleeping schedule. She goes to bed rather early. She's an early riser, and my uncle always follows suit. But on this particular trip, it was a party. Like, I beat my aunt and uncle to bed. I had to be the one to say I have to go to bed because I couldn't stay up anymore. I had driven all the way out to Rapid City, and um, just all the different things you do. So my husband and I were usually like the first two to be exhausted. But that made it even more fun. The other thing about it is that my dad loves to sing songs, and um, my dad and his twin were raised by Irish nuns, so they have like this whole kind of repertoire of Catholic songs that they sing, right? But in addition to that, Irish songs. So like my dad liked to sing "Irish Eyes Are Smiling," um, and he just breaks into song all the time. And my uncle, I don't think, does that as much. But with my dad being there, it just was this constant like show tunes, and they would sing together. And of course, some of us would join in and sing with them, but it was just on repeat because the dementia played a part of that. And so these songs would just be repetitively sung. And it was just happy. And the mood felt very light. In the meantime, we still have this whole like snow. It did not stop snowing for the first 2 days we were there. But it was such a relaxing, exciting trip. And one of the things that we did was we decided we'd go visit Spearfish Canyon. And I wanted to go do that because I am Sicangu, and my relative traditionally would, in the wintertime, go to Spearfish Canyon, and that's where they went to in the winter to protect themselves from the elements of the high plains. So it's something I wanted to do, and it had been forever since I've been there. My aunt and uncle hadn't been really anywhere, and they said they hadn't been there for years either. So we all piled into the van, and it's about an hour and a half drive, and then it's about a 45 minute to hour drive through the whole canyon. And it's just gorgeous. I mean, the snow was so thick, heavy, and then you have the creek running through and the water flowing. I mean, there were just so many elements. And like I said, it was just therapeutic. And of course, now we got the back part going on with my dad and my uncle singing songs. And another thing that they do is they tell really embellish stories. They were both very successful individuals. They have numerous accomplishments. But if they're with their dementia, they tend to tell even bigger stories that we know aren't necessarily true. And, you just kind of let them go along with it. But, when you're living with it, you have to remind yourself to laugh, and to enjoy the space you're in, but sometimes it can be very daunting. And so to hear some of these stories, like for instance, one of them had said that they were the vice president of the United States. The other one frequently, my dad, who likes to sing, talks about singing in front of 30 to 40,000 people at football games. And, and it's just one of those things like, what do you do? And so these stories, we had all heard numerous times, including my aunt. She gets them too, right? And instead of them feeling so daunting, we just kind of all went with it. And nobody tried to control the conversation. None of us tried to make them stop. We just let them talk. And they had such a rapport with one another, and they shared things and experiences with us. And even though they may have been elaborated on, it was just nice to have them be so light. They felt light and they were happy. And so that was a cool thing about the trip. And one thing, my aunt and uncle and my dad were upstairs, and my husband and I were down in the rec room where we were staying. And there's a door, and I always remember I was in there changing my clothes or whatever. And my husband walked in the door, and I could hear my dad and my uncle singing. Um, Irish Eyes Are Smiling at the top of their lungs. And my husband closed the door, and the sound kind of went away. And we were chatting and, about how much fun we were having and everything. And my husband went to leave again, and he opened up the door, and they were still singing. And it was like it was from a movie or something. It was just completely joyful. And that's exactly what that trip was. And I know that we all just ended up going away from that as feeling such relief. And it was their 81st birthday while we were there. So it was just one ginormous party in the time of quarantine. And hopefully we'll get to experience something like that again, but it'll never be quite the same because of the whole circumstance of where we were and everything.